Welcome back to another Reverse 1999 character guide. This time, we are taking a look at Aleph, the upcoming intellect support built for Impromptu Incantation team. But before we dive into his kit, let's do a quick refresher on how the Impromptu Incantation team actually works. Impromptu Incantation activates when your team includes at least one character or a Psychube that enables the mechanic. And you'll also need someone with the Eureka system. Every time you spend Eureka, it's converted into Inspiration, which attach to your incantations for the next turn. Use those inspired incantations and the total inspiration gets added together to trigger an impromptu incantation after your team's action, dealing damage that scales off the final count. Most impromptu characters also have extra effect that boosts this damage further. And since the impromptu incantation uses the average stats of your whole team, you'll want to invest in the entire team instead of just stacking one carry. Aleph is basically the Flutterpage of the impromptu team, but unlike Flutterpage, he's pretty much locked into this singular team right now, as he doesn't bring much value outside of it. Within the impromptu team though, he's huge. His skill 1 gives the team an extra action point, while also stacking buffs and debuffs to supercharge the impromptu hit. With his ultimate, it is possible to hit over 1,000,000 damage in the burst turn with a fully invested impromptu team. All in all, Aleph can boost your impromptu team's total output by around 30 to 50% compared to Flutterpage. For context, it's about on par with what Barcarola brings compared to Matilda. There are 4 main things you need to know about Aleph, starting with his skill 1. His skill 1 gives him continuous action 1, which means your team gets 1 extra move on the next turn. Just keep in mind, continuous action 1 doesn't stack, so put your Flutterpage back in the suitcase. This skill can also spend 2 Eurekas to make the impromptu incantation hit 1 extra time that turn, but honestly, the real value here is still the +1 AP. You want to use the skill every single turn. That extra action is very valuable to impromptu team as it's more chance to transfer inspiration and also spending Eureka, which fuels even bigger impromptu hits. The next 2 things are tied to Aleph's skill 2 and managing his Eureka. Skill 2 gives the whole team a unique 3-turn buff. Each stacks at +10% incantation might up to a max of 4 stack at +40%. The base skill gives 1 to 3 stacks depending on the rank, and if Aleph has enough, he'll spend 2 extra Eureka to gain an extra stack on top. Whenever you're planning to use his skill 2, make sure you've got the Eureka ready for the extra stack, allowing you to max out the stack with just 2 use of his buff card. Now, here is where it gets a little tricky. When an ally with this buff attacks, Aleph will consume 1 Eureka. And this isn't just for attack type incantations. Any card that targets an enemy will trigger it. In return though, each trigger lets the turn's impromptu incantation to have one of its hit enhanced to apply a debuff to the enemy. This reduces both damage reduction and mental defense, scaling from -10% at 1 stack up to -24% at 8 stacks. The problem with this is that if you're not careful, you can burn through his Eureka really fast, especially if you're also pairing him with Barcarola's ultimate, which causes even more Eureka spending. He only regenerates 4 Eureka per turn with a 25% chance to refund spend once, so if you need that bonus stack from his skill 2, make sure you use it before using any other card that turn. Lastly, let's talk about Aleph's ultimate. This is where most of his burst potential comes from. When he casts it, he enters a channeling state, and remember the first 2 incantations used that turn. Then, at the beginning of the next turn, he'll end his channeling and replay both of the skill at the end of the round. Now, even though Aleph starts the next turn still in channeling, that state ends at the beginning of the turn, meaning you can still use his skill as usual, even though it says he's locked into channeling. There are a couple things to note about this memorized card. Alephs will remember the exact rank and any inspiration attached to those casts, but the replayed version won't generate Moxie and will target the enemy on the front. Additionally, any special effect attached to the skill will also be remembered, so if you had something like Regulus's impromptu targeting mark active, that effect will carry over and apply to the echoed version as well. Finally, while most impromptu focused characters give bonus inspiration with the ultimate, Aleph instead gives 2 extra hits to the impromptu of that turn when his channeling ends. Additionally, he will apply his unique debuff to all of the hits from that turn, with the final strike detonating all stacks for a huge burst of mental damage. So that's a lot of words, but how do you actually play him? Well, overall, the Impromptu Incantation team has always leaned into being an ultimate focus comp, but Alephs take it to another level. When you're running a full impromptu setup, your rotation tends to revolve around 3 things: spending enough Eureka to build up inspiration, keeping Aleph's buff and debuffs active, and cycle both Barcarola and Aleph's ultimate as quick as possible. Personally, I like to start by doing a empty move on Barcarola's card early on, so I can get her first ultimate off by turn 3. After that, the team settle into a pretty stable 3 to 4 turn rotation. Of course, you still need to stay flexible, automatic fusion or weird card orders can mess things up, but the general idea is to always be prepared for Aleph's ultimate. On the turn where you get Aleph's ultimate, you ideally want Barcarola and maybe a third impromptu character be sitting at 3 or 4 Moxies. That turn, open with Barcarola's skills, follow up with Aleph's skill 1 to keep continuous action rolling, and then drop his ultimate. And on the next turn, you go in with Aleph's skill 1 again and uses his skill 2 if his buff wore off. Then it's time for your ultimate and more Barcarola skill to pop off the burst. If you execute it cleanly, this rotation can easily dash out a million damage in one go, and depending on how the draft and refresh goes, you'll be able to repeat that burst every 3 to 4 turns. As for Aleph's build, it's actually super straightforward. His signature Psychube is obviously best in slot to hit max out once your team spent 30 Eurekas, which is extremely easy to hit in a full impromptu team. Plus, it gives Aleph 2 Eureka right at the start of the combat, which is nice little bonus for applying his debuff in the early turns. If you don't have the resource to level his signature, Long Night Talk is a solid fallback. It's one of the best options for any attack skilling unit who also have access to buff card, so it fits him perfectly. Now let's look at his portrait. As the impromptu version of Flutterpage, his P1 makes continuous action last an extra turn, but honestly, it's only situationally useful. Unlike Flutterpage, Aleph actually wants to be using his skill 1 every turn anyway, since you are trying to maintain uptime on his ultimate, which is a huge part of your team's burst. Though having his P1 does allow him to use his skill 2 a bit more often, and also allows him to not use his skill 1 before his ultimate, which would waste the Moxie for him. The passive Eureka refund from P1 can also help depending on your rotation, but it's not a must-have. It's overall more of a quality of life portrait. P2 on the other hand is a massive upgrade. It lets his ultimate memory 3 incantation instead of 2, and also buffs the power of his debuff stacks that adds a notable bump to your burst turn. After that, P3 and P5 are just straight damage boost to the final hit of his ult, and P4 gave a slight bonus to the incantation might from his team buff. When it comes to team options, there's honestly not much to say, because Aleph is strictly built for the impromptu team. His buffs and debuffs apply to the whole team, sure, but almost every part of his kit, his skill 2 to his ultimate, is designed specifically to amplify impromptu incantation. Unless you do not have other modern characters, I would suggest against trying to use him as a general support. And that wraps up the guide for Aleph. He might seem a little complex at first, mostly because of the whole impromptu system is built around team synergy and ultimate timing. You don't actually have to stress too much about it. Impromptu team are so instantly strong that even if you run them on full auto, especially once Caparina is in the mix, they'll still roll through most contents. Only a few of the harder reveries in the ring fight might give you trouble. So, you guys getting Aleph, or are you skipping him for the collab? Let me know in the comment down below. And as always, this has been SteamButNext. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.